In this video, we'll analyze the intriguing differences between the onboard systems of Ferrari and McLaren. In fact, the data from the test clearly revealed the behavior of the SF25 and the MCL-Three-nine. But not only that, it's race week, and we also have to look at the statements made by Vasseur and Helmut before the first Grand Prix of the season in Australia. We also need to see what Norris said, the internal battle of the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, and we also look at the new rules of 2025 that could change the internal scenarios of Formula 1. Before we start, please leave a supportive like, and now let's look at everything in detail. As the Australian Grand Prix approaches, some very interesting onboard data differences emerge between Ferrari and McLaren, and we can therefore evaluate the behavior of the two cars, the SF25 and the MCL-Three-nine. Although pre-season tests do not always represent the absolute value of performance, they provide clear indications on the approach adopted by the teams. Comparing the data of Lewis Hamilton and Oscar Piastri, some interesting differences emerge in the behavior of the two single-seaters. Let's look at it turn by turn. For example, in turn 1 in Bahrain, Ferrari showed a slight inaccuracy on entry, probably due to the new pull rod front suspension that modifies the management of load transfers. Hamilton tends to slightly anticipate the apex point to better position himself for the next change of direction. McLaren, on the other hand, experimented with different trajectories to optimize the exit, but Piastri had some difficulty in keeping the rear stable during acceleration. Turn 4 is one of the most critical on the track and highlighted a lack of rotation on the SF25. Hamilton was forced to correct the understeer with small pulses to the steering wheel. Piastri, despite also experiencing understeer, showed greater fluidity thanks to the better aerodynamic load of the McLaren. The curve's inclination naturally generates this behavior, but the balance of the McLaren allowed Piastri to attack the apex better than the Ferrari. And the most marked differences emerge in medium-speed curves. Ferrari aims to maximize mechanical grip, resulting in more stability on exit. McLaren, on the other hand, utilizes a higher dynamic load which allows it to be more effective on entry. In turn 6, Piastri manages to maintain a higher minimum speed, while Hamilton is forced to use a greater steering angle, a sign of a more pronounced understeer tendency on the Ferrari. In the hairpin of turn 8, Ferrari again shows difficulty in mid-corner rotation. However, in acceleration, the SF25 better transfers power to the ground, thanks to a rear setup that allows for more squat or the lowering of the rear end during acceleration. McLaren, on the other hand, opts for a stiffer setup to stabilize the aerodynamic platform, slightly sacrificing traction at low speeds. Turn 11 is one of the most challenging on the track and highlights another key difference between the two single-seaters. Piastri can turn the MCL-Three-nine more decisively thanks to the more precise front end. Hamilton is forced to widen his trajectory more to avoid overstressing the front of the SF25. And this is also reflected in the ability to attack the curbs. McLaren manages to cut the corners better while Ferrari has to be more conservative. But let's get to the last corner. 13 is particularly insidious because of its negative banking. Ferrari has found a good balance, but the understeer remains evident with a greater steering angle compared to McLaren. McLaren, although more agile, tends to break up slightly on exit, penalizing traction. But can Ferrari solve the understeer problem for Melbourne? The onboard data shows that McLaren is more ready than Ferrari in terms of entry and traversal. However, the Maranello team has worked intensively to reduce understeer and improve car handling in the more technical curves. With the Melbourne weekend approaching and with a Ferrari that has worked intensively on the simulator, it will be interesting to see if the technical updates will bring the hoped-for results. In short, these are the main differences between Ferrari and McLaren. It's also worth noting that the Bahrain track is completely different from that of Melbourne. Australia is a track with many fast curves, many points that are faced head-on even after the modification of the layout and the track. There are many drag reduction system zones. Ferrari has worked to maximize the setup of the single-seater for this race. In addition, track conditions will be hotter than in Bahrain. It will be important to have good mechanical grip in Australia and at the same time good efficiency of the single-seater. Ferrari has revolutionized its internal organization to improve team management also in view of this new season. In Formula 1, it's not enough to have a competitive car and two fast drivers. Success also depends on impeccable planning. Just a few days before the season debut in Australia, the Maranello team has worked hard to maximize their potential and optimize every detail. Frederic Vasseur has now been at the helm of Ferrari for over 2 years, taking over from Mattia Binotto after the latter had held the dual role of team principal and technical director. While Binotto had solid technical experience, his approach as a centralizer ended up overloading him, leading to his departure from the team. Vasseur, on the other hand, has a completely different strategy, focusing on team cohesion and the ability to react in critical moments. A clear example was the management of the technical issue with the aerodynamic flaw last season and the replacement of Enrico Cardile without destabilizing the technical department. One of the most noticeable differences from the past is the ability to delegate. Vasseur, despite being an engineer, is not a world-renowned designer, but he understood the importance of surrounding himself with competent people. That's why he introduced the role of deputy team principal entrusted to Jérôme D'Ambrosio. The former Belgian driver, with extensive experience in motorsport, has become his right-hand man, allowing him to focus on the strategic aspects of the team without neglecting operational details. This move shows humility and pragmatism, in contrast to the past, when Binotto tried to manage everything himself. Furthermore, Ferrari has strengthened the team with other support figures, less visible but crucial to improve the management of operations on and off the track. 2025 will be crucial for Ferrari. After 2 seasons leading the team, Vasseur is expected to face the test in his 3rd year. Organizational progress must translate into concrete results. John Elkann, who has placed full trust in the Frenchman and has heavily invested in the arrival of Lewis Hamilton, expects to see Ferrari finally competitive at the highest levels. In short, the Melbourne Grand Prix will represent the first real test for the team's new structure.
A bench
of tests that will say a lot about the ambitions of the Red in this season. In short, yes, compared to Binotto, it will be a completely different team management, and he doesn't want to put too much pressure on Ferrari in these first races of the season, even though he himself knows that they will be crucial for the progress of 2025, because we all know that from mid-season onwards, after the summer break, everyone will focus on the 2026 season and the regulatory change that will be crucial for the coming years. So, be careful that this first race in Australia and the first races of the season will give us a key indication on the development of this year's Ferrari and how the season itself will go, what will be the reference forces in the field, and if there will really be so much competition among the top teams, which is what we all expect, even though Helmut Marko is a bit skeptical about it. According to Helmut Marko, Ferrari is already out of contention for the 2025 championship. The Red Bull consultant, with his usual confidence, has already labeled the SF25 as a car lagging behind the competition, unable to compete at
the top. What a pity.
While Red Bull appears to have extensive knowledge of its competitors, the RB21's internal issues are becoming apparent.
The same.
Max Verstappen has admitted that the single-seater still suffers from instability on the curbs, a flaw inherited from the previous season. A detail that should worry more than the fate of Ferrari. Marko has ruled that Ferrari is destined to stay behind Red Bull and McLaren. Yet his arguments are based on data collected from tests, which have always been little indicative of the real hierarchies. According to his vision, at least 4 drivers will be faster than the 2 Ferraris in Australia. If true, prancing horse fans should expect no better than 5th place in the season's opening GP. But are we certain the games are over? Just last month, Marko called Charles Leclerc an inconsistent driver. A rather superficial analysis, considering that in 2024 the Monegasque scored more points than anyone in the second part of the season. The numbers say that Leclerc has always finished in the top 5 in the last races, but for Marko this doesn't count. After all, the super consultant of Red Bull has never had problems making clear judgments, even when reality shows the opposite. In addition to downgrading Ferrari to 3rd force, Helmut Marko has already decided the internal duel between Hamilton and Leclerc. The Briton is destined to be overshadowed by his new teammate. According to the Austrian, Lewis's experience in Formula 1 cannot compensate for Charles's greater knowledge of Ferrari. So, according to this theory, Hamilton would have already lost the comparison before it even began. A verdict that sounds rather hasty, especially considering Hamilton's adaptability and the fact that in the past he has always been able to compete at the highest level with any teammate. Consider your experiences with Alonso as a McLaren teammate and also with Jenson Button, both world champions. In short, statements like these are part of the character of Helmut Marko, always provocative and direct. But often his predictions turn out to be more of a psychological pressure tool than a real technical analysis. 2025 has just begun, and Ferrari, with Leclerc and Hamilton, has all the cards in place to refute its detractors. Melbourne will be the first real test to see if Marko's words have a basis in truth or if he has once again given in to premature judgments. We know how Helmut Marko did it. He makes these statements to create psychological pressure on the other teams, even though I'm convinced that the biggest problems are within Red Bull itself, not only in the management of the car that needs to be competitive, but also in the management of a 4-time world champion who, in case Red Bull is not competitive, well, he would have all the interest in looking for a more competitive team for the coming years, so be careful. Adrian Newey will have left Red Bull and he is a top-level designer in Formula 1, and Red Bull seems to be a bit shaky on the power unit even with the collaboration with Ford, so Helmut Marko should perhaps focus more on looking at his own team and the problems it is facing at the moment rather than talking about others without knowing the truth. It's still too early to make a call on this year's Ferrari, so let's wait for the first races before giving a solid opinion. Having said that, McLaren with Norris has also made a call on the season. In fact, McLaren enters the start of the 2025 World Championship with a new awareness, the role of favorite. After impressive growth over the past season, culminating in the conquest of the Constructors' title, Andrea Stella's team wants to confirm its place at the top. And Lando Norris, the Vice World Champion, is not hiding.
The British
Feels he has a competitive car from the first Grand Prix and believes he can fight for his first world title. 2024 marked the handover between Red Bull and McLaren in terms of technical leadership. If at the beginning of the season the Milton Keynes team seemed unbeatable, after the China GP the gap gradually reduced to a clear overtaking in the second part of the championship. Now, with the last year of regulatory stability, before 2026 McLaren starts with an advantage, a car already developed at the highest levels and a clear evolutionary strategy. Ferrari has launched the radically new SF25, while Red Bull aims to address the weaknesses of the RB20. Meanwhile, McLaren has refined the work on the MCL-Three-nine, progressively improving the car and culminating in the MCL-Three-nine. And Norris feels he is the favorite for this World Championship. The layout of the Melbourne track with medium speed corners perfectly suits the characteristics of the McLaren. And if the perceived superiority in testing will be confirmed in the race, Norris has no choice but to go for the world title this year. After last season, there are no more excuses for him. He must prove he can handle the challenge of battling Verstappen. However, it's not just the car that will be the deciding factor, but especially in this season where all the teams will be aligned, having a more aggressive Norris than usual will make a difference. Verstappen, Leclerc and Hamilton face challenges, but watch out for the fast and determined Piastri. Australian talent won't settle for being second-rate. It will be an equal internal clash. In McLaren, after years of waiting, it seems to be the time for McLaren to really fight for the world title. From the start of the season, we must discuss a crucial matter, the first clash that the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has won, and also about the new rules of Formula 1 2025. In fact, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile and Liberty Media have officially announced the entry of Cadillac as the 11th team starting from the 2026 season, a decision expected after General Motors confirmed its commitment not only as a manufacturer but also as a power unit supplier from 2028. For the first 2 seasons, the American team will utilize Ferrari technology, including transferable components. The arrival of Cadillac represents a hard blow for the current 10 teams who have been opposing the expansion of the grid for years because the teams believe they are the real engine of Formula 1's popularity and do not want to share the revenue with new competitors. During the pandemic, many teams have invested in people, resources to keep Formula 1 alive, and now they don't want a new team to benefit from their work without facing the same difficulties. Despite this, it is the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile that has asserted its authority, won this first battle, proving to be the only body capable of deciding who can enter the World Championship of Formula 1, and be careful that the 12th team could also arrive. In fact, the maximum number of teams could reach 12 with Cadillac officially in. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile could force the hand for a further expansion of the grid that could trigger a new wave of tensions. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile is focusing on both the 2026 season and the new 2025 rules. In fact, we have some news about safety. From this season, there will be monitoring of cockpit temperatures. If the internal temperature exceeds 31 degrees 100, the pilots will receive a warning signal and will have the opportunity to activate a cooling kit. There are stricter rules in the pits that after a pit stop, the cars will not be able to leave the pitch if there is a risk of collision with other drivers or personnel in the pit lane. And there's an immediate stop for damaged vehicles. If a car suffers serious damage, the race director can order an immediate withdrawal, preventing drivers from trying to return to the pits for repairs. But there are also changes in the race weekend format, no more additional point for the fastest lap, a new management of the starts. The race direction can force the use of extreme wet tires if the qualifications are cancelled for any reason. The grid will be determined based on the driver's standings, and in Monte Carlo, a minimum of 2 mandatory stops is introduced to make the race more interesting. We also have some technical news from Melbourne. There will be tests on the movable wings and the force applied to verify their rigidity. It will go from 10 to 30 newtons. The drag reduction system mechanism will only have 2 fixed positions. And the opening time cannot exceed 400 milliseconds. There will be more freedom on the transmission components. And there will be a deadline for the front wings, which is set within the Spanish GP to make it even stiffer. Fewer tests with old cars and tests for 2026 tires after the Abu Dhabi GP. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we covered in the video. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. Every day we look at all the news about Formula 1 and Ferrari. I'll leave you with some related videos. That's all from Rastro. See you in the next video.